Welcome to the Code Ryan podcast. Today I'm joined by Arsalan to discuss ViteJS, and then we're also going to kind of end with some mistakes that junior developers tend to make. So first off, Arsalan, could you give kind of like a brief introduction on a little bit of your background?
I'm a computer science graduate. I graduated in 2022, so not a long time ago. I have a very interesting story of getting into computers. When I was a kid, I started watching those movies where hackers type some gibberish thing on the keyboard, and that is something that got me excited for the computer stuff. So that's how I started into computers and computer sciences and programming, etc. So I was doing all of these stuff from a very young age when I was like 12 or 13. And then when I got into the campus, I got a lot of exposure into different communities that includes like the Microsoft, GitHub, and Google communities. And that is how I got connected with other people. And then finally found my passion, which is into web development and, to be more specific, front-end technologies. And that is how I ended up doing those things. And while I joined these communities, I also realized that I am in the love. I am in the love with teaching these things to others because one, it helps me to get a very good idea of how these things work, and the second thing is it also makes me a very good developer. And then it also, if I'm teaching it to someone else, then I'm probably doing this publicly so that when I'm applying for the jobs, the people can see me online and they can see my content, and that makes me stand out. So those were like a few of the main reasons. So that is a little bit about me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that seeing some of those coders in movies, they tend to make them out to be like just like these wizards on computers and stuff. So that's awesome that was like some of the impetus that kind of got you into everything. And I totally agree with the points you make on like when you're teaching a subject to someone, you learn so much more about it because like to explain something, you really have to understand it. So I think that's a huge benefit. And then also like for career reasons, to keep learning new things, for when you apply to things, it makes you stand out a bit more. So I think that those are all really cool reasons. So kind of with that, I know you have some content on ViteJS, and for me, this isn't a tool that I'm super familiar with. So I think this will be a really good kind of introduction for me and hopefully for those listening as well. So I think a good place for us to kind of dive in here is just like, what is ViteJS?
Sure. So, by the way, a very funny story is if you would ask me the same question like 2 months ago, I would say I have absolutely no idea what that thing is. Does that even exist? And the funny thing is, so I recently made a post on my Instagram about Create React app, and I was not aware of ViteJS because in my daily life I don't do programming anymore because I teach content. And a lot of people talked about ViteJS. So I opened the website and I started learning this, and I found this very interesting. And I thought, let's share this with everyone else. And that's how I ended up making a whole video, and now currently I'm writing a whole book on it, an ebook on it. So basically, ViteJS is a front-end tool, and you can say it's an alternative to Create React app. If any of you have used Create React app, it helps you to generate boilerplates for your projects. But it's not just a boilerplate; it's a lot more than that. It has a lot of features. When you are working with the code, it has a lot of features that can improve your workflow, that can improve your productivity by speeding up everything that you're working. So minimizing your wait time when you are reloading your work, when you're in the dev environment, etc. So that is the very general idea of what Vite is.
Awesome. So for me, my understanding is that it's somewhat of a replacement of Create React App. So instead of doing like Create React App, my app, or whatever, you would do some sort of command to generate a React app, but with ViteJS. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. But another good thing is it's not just limited to React. It has support for a lot of other technologies that includes Angular, that includes Swift, that includes Vue.js, and even the vanilla JavaScript, etc. So it has support of a lot of other frameworks, including React.js.
So with that, why would someone maybe choose to use ViteJS over a different tool like React? Like what kind of additional benefits does it have for someone to choose this over some other alternative?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So if you have used React app, create React app, and you have made projects with that. So first thing is when you start doing this, and this is one of the main problem with me. I'm not sure why, but every time, especially when I used to record the stuff that I was doing, it used to take a long time, a much longer time as compared to when I'm not recording the stuff. So whenever I do npx create React app and my app, it takes a lot of time to install all those dependencies, Webpack, etc. Especially when I am recording, it takes even much more longer time. So that is one of the issue with Create React App. It has a lot of dependencies, which as a result takes a lot of time to install those dependencies and setting up your project. Now the problem with the problem that Vite solves is when you're making a project with Vite, to be specific, a React project. It does not install all those dependencies like Webpack, etc. It just installs like 3 to 4 dependencies of React, and which makes it very quick to set up the project for you just within a few seconds. And if you compare both of them side by side, you will see Vite installation completes super fast as compared to the Create React app. Now that is one of the things. That it has a very minimalist workflow and a very minimalist project setup, so it does not have a lot of dependencies. That is one of the good thing. And then another thing is when we are working with a Create React app, and as the project size increases, we notice that whenever we are making changes, it takes a lot of time to refresh and hot reload the app, especially like when we have like a very old project which has like a bunch of dependencies and a bunch of components, etc. But this is not the problem with Vite. In Vite, it does not matter whatever the project size you have, even if it's like a 1 month old project or a 6 months old project or 1 line of code or 6,000 lines of code, you will not face this problem. Whatever the project size is, regardless of the app size, Vite provides a very smooth workflow. So you do not have to wait for a few seconds or maybe a minute to start the developer server or keep doing the hot reload. So every time you make some change, it instantly refresh that for you. So yeah, and that is because Vite use a very different workflow as compared to Create React app. In the Create React app, it's using Webpack, etc. to bundle those dependencies. But that's not the case with Vite. It's using some of the other things, some of the other dependencies, and then it only update that specific component that has to, where you make changes. So that's why it makes it very fast as compared to Create React app.
I know that for my current project for my professional job, and if anybody listening hears some background noise, there's construction going on right now at my apartment, so there's like jackhammers and stuff, so I'll try to hopefully minimize that as much in post. But with that, I know that for my current professional job, we actually use Create React App for it, and one of the trickiest things right now, and it's a large app, lots of dependencies, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, and one tricky part is like managing those dependencies within Webpack and then having breaking changes and stuff like that. So like if someone has an existing application like we do, and we're having a hard time kind of manage all these dependencies, do you think that like it would be possible to transition to something like ViteJS and kind of migrate over? Or would that kind of be a little bit of a headache and maybe not provide as many benefits? Or what do you kind of think about if someone has an existing Create React app, the kind of potential migration process to something like ViteJS?
So one of the thing with Vite is it does not use Webpack. So for example, if your project has some custom Webpack plugins, so that might be one of the things that you need to consider. But apart from that, so the folder structure are the components inside that, the main components. We're not talking about the dependencies like Webpack and Web, etc. The main project. I think you can just copy and paste that in the Vite project. But of course, you will need to do some modification. But then depends on how many plugins you're using, how many extra features you're using, how many custom plugins you have, etc. So based on all those things, I would say the answer depends on all those things. If you do not have any of those things, then it would not be that much of a headache. But if you have a lot of custom things, then you have to find a alternative for that for the Vite, because since Vite is not using a Webpack, etc. So, but Vite has this ability to you can make custom plugins for Vite. So, for example, if you're using a Webpack plugin or a Weber plugin, and you want that exact same thing in Vite, so it might not be available, but then maybe if you want, you can make a custom plugin for that. The same thing with Vite. So depends on if you are using plugins, then you might be need to do some extra work. But if you're not using plugins and it's a very simple project, then maybe in that case it's going to be very straightforward.
Gotcha. And for us personally, we do have quite a bit of plugins and stuff, so I think that migration project process might be a little bit of a headache, but definitely something I'm still going to kind of look into and see what that might look like, because we definitely are running into some of those challenges with managing dependencies and stuff like that. But with that, we kind of touched on some of the features you like with ViteJS. Are there other features that you haven't mentioned yet that you really like about it that kind of make it stand out compared to some of these other kind of build tools and things like that?
Yeah. So another thing is, well, one of the thing that I think I just talked about two of the features, that is instant server support. When you start this developer server, it instantly starts. So you do not need to wait for it. But apart from this, it has this another feature of, it has a very good support for TypeScript, etc. So it has flexible APIs with a full TypeScript support. And then apart from this, it has a support for plugins. So there is, although it does not use Webpack, but it still has a very huge list of plugins that is available on GitHub that you can use for that. And I think for most of the time, you will have a plugin already available if you want to, if you need something. But then apart from this, there is also, you also have the have this option that you can make your own plugins as well. So that is those are a few of the other things that you can do in Vite. And then another thing is, it also has boilerplates for TypeScript version of the projects. For example, if you want to go with a static JavaScript project, but if you want to go with a static TypeScript project, like no framework, no technologies like React, etc., you have the option for that. If you want a React project with the TypeScript, you have option for that. Vue.js with TypeScript, you have option for that. So you have a lot of these boilerplates available in Vite.
Awesome. And one of my questions that I was going to ask you is, does it integrate well with other things like TypeScript and Tailwind and other things like that? And it sounds like it has all these kind of integrations pretty readily available.
Yes, it has the integration with these different technologies like Tailwind, etc. Especially the Tailwind, it works super smooth with Vite, and same is the case with Tailwind, with TypeScript, etc. So all of these dependencies, all of these technologies works very good with TypeScript, with Vite, and it's very easy and very straightforward to integrate these things in Vite. For example, with the Tailwind, it's a pretty straightforward process. It's the same thing as you would do in the Create React app. So there isn't any such thing that you have to do specifically for Vite that you don't do with Create React apps. It's very straight, simple, and straightforward process.
I know one thing that you talked about in your course was kind of how Vite makes deployment pretty easy and kind of making your production application go live. How does that kind of process look like? Is it similar to using like a Create React app, or do they make it even easier? What's kind of the deployment look like?
So two things. One is the very good thing is on the Vite official website. If you go to the documentation, there is a whole section about deployments, and the good thing is if you check that deployment section, it has a guide for a lot of platforms. Now that includes GitHub Pages, that includes GitLab, that includes Netlify, Vercel, Google Firebase, Azure, and a lot of other platforms. So one is the documentation is very good for deployment. That makes it super easy for even someone who is doing this for the very first time. If they're not sure how to do this, so they can go through the documentation. And another thing is it's I would say it's kind of like the same as deploying the Create React app to these platforms. For example, if you're deploying a Create React app to GitHub Pages, it's almost the same as the Vite project, but then there is like a small modification you have to do in config. I forgot if you have to do that same thing in create react app, but it's very simple and it's very straightforward. But one of the good thing that I liked about Vite is their deployment section covers a lot of platforms that's mostly used, like GitHub, Netlify, Versa, Azure, Google Firebase, etc. So it's and the documentation is very straightforward. So it's making it very easy to deploy on any of these platforms.
I think that definitely makes things pretty easy. And then when it comes to kind of the support of ViteJS, is it readily updated package that has, you know, developers working on full time and stuff? Is it a pretty well supported package overall?
Yeah. So by the way, Vite is developed by the person who is behind. Vite is developed by the mind who is behind Vue.js. So that same guy who developed Vue is behind Vite. So it has around 50,000 plus stars and around 4,000 plus, around 5,000 forks. And I must say, it is a super active project. And if I go to the GitHub repository, and I'm just checking this right now. So the last commit was done like 7 hours ago. So yeah, it is definitely not one of those projects which is super hyped initially, but then with time it gradually slows down. And then there is also a dedicated community on Discord, which is also very super active and super helpful. So yeah, it's definitely not one of those packages that does not have the support, because I think everybody who is listening to this has a very good idea of what Vue is and how the community of Vue is. So Vite is developed by the same person who is behind the Vue.
I know that that's usually a pretty big potential concern, is like how active is the package, how well supported is it, how good of a community it has around it. Because like, you know, with Create React App, people probably pretty well know that that's, you know, well supported. There's a big community around it and stuff like that. So it sounds like the same is true for ViteJS. So I think with that, is there anything else that you wanted to mention about ViteJS that people should know, or any takeaways before we kind of move into some mistakes that junior devs make?
I think one of the takeaway for I would say not a takeaway, but I would say maybe everyone should try learning and using ViteJS. Like I said this initially as well, I was not aware of what ViteJS, if you would ask me this question in like 2 months before. But then I made a post on what is Create React App from Instagram, and everyone was talking about ViteJS. So I opened the website, I figured out what exactly it is, and then started learning this. And now I don't think I'm ever going to go back to Create React App. But no hate for Create React App, but it's just that I think this is much more faster than Create React App, and then the community is also very helpful, and especially the documentation. It's very detailed, having everything, and also there are a lot of custom plugins as well that you can make for whatever your use case is. So everyone should try it at least once.
And I think that a good place to start are your courses at the Khattak that you produce around ViteJS, which we'll definitely get to where people could find you here in just a little bit. But before we wrap up, you also had a really cool video on mistakes that junior devs make. And I could definitely relate to a lot of these mistakes that I personally made early on in my career. So could you maybe cover a few of the mistakes that you see that junior developers make that maybe they don't even realize that they're making when they're kind of just starting out?
Sure. So one of the, I would say, major mistake is a lot of people make a lot of good projects, but then there is nobody in the world except for that person knows about those projects. And if you are, let's say, one of the best developer, but your websites, your projects does not exist on GitHub or anywhere publicly, it's of no worth. It doesn't matter how good you are a developer, because if you cannot communicate your skills and your projects and your work to the company or to the public, it does not matter how good your projects are. So one of the things that I also regret doing this is not building in public from the very start. I started doing this from 2018, 2019. If I had an idea of how important this is from the very start, I might have started that instantly. So make sure that whenever you're working on something, make sure to talk about it publicly, make sure to share that publicly, make sure to share that journey. Whatever you're, for example, if you're about to start on an open source project, so talk about it on Twitter, talk about it on Twitter and LinkedIn, etc. Talk about what progress have you made today. Talk about if there is a new, if it's published, so talk about it. If there is a new feature on it, talk about it. So this way, there are two things. One is you get noticed on the social media, and then another thing is people also get to know about that product as well that you're working on. I always give this example that, and now building in public is something that also helps you as an individual to be known in the industry and in the community. And I always give this example of, let's say you watch TV and there is a specific commercial, let's say a shampoo commercial that you see like 5 to 6 times every day on the TV. And then one day you go to you go to a shop and you have to buy a shampoo. Now you have two options. One is that same shampoo that you've been seeing on the TV for like hundreds of times now. And then there is another option that is a shampoo that you have never heard of before. Now, it's very obvious that you are going to go with that shampoo which you have heard of before. And this is human psychology. If you hear something again and again and again, it builds that credibility and it builds that trust between you and that product, or you and the human. So that is why it's important to keep showing up every day, talk about things. If you have nothing to talk about, if you're thinking about what should I talk about, so just document your journey, share about that. You build something, talk about that. You learn something, talk about that. You learn a new tip, you learn a new hack, you learn a new language, make a video, make a blog post, or make a small code snippet and share that. So there are a lot of ways that you can talk about things. So yeah, that is one of the major mistake that not many people, especially the juniors, are doing, and which should not be the case.
Absolutely. And on top of that, it's also going to provide you some feedback on what you're maybe doing right or wrong, and that's going to help you move forward. And then with that as well, it's going to help you improve your communication skills and explaining kind of technical concepts, to where if you're writing a blog post or you're creating a tweet or you're producing a video, you kind of have to do it in a way that it makes sense and that your audience receives well. And that's going to force you to kind of communicate well. And I think a lot of people underestimate the value of having really strong communication skills as a developer. It's more than just being able to write code. You need to kind of communicate with other developers and even people that are working more on the product design side of things and stuff like that. So I think those are definitely great tips. And then alongside of that, you kind of also mentioned in the video that sometimes when people are starting out, they kind of ignore the core fundamentals of something and they just kind of jump into just like trying to get something to work without really understanding how it's working. And I think a potential example of this is like someone will first focus on like getting an app to work while using React.js, but they don't actually understand the core fundamentals of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, the building blocks of the web. So could you maybe speak to how ignoring the fundamentals might come back to bite someone in kind of the long run?
Sure. So one of this is also one of the major issue, and this especially is the problem when you are trying to you're expecting one thing and you see another thing. You see you see completely unexpected result of your code. So a very simple example of this is someone is running CSS and they skip the basic parts and then they just instantly jump to Bootstrap. Now it can help you make websites because of all the features available on other classes available on Bootstrap, and the documentation can help you. But if you're going to see in something unexpected, you might not be able to figure it out. Let's talk about Flexbox. So there are the classes for Flexbox in Bootstrap. You can use that, but let's say you see an unexpected result. Now you're not sure how exactly this is happening or what's happening behind the scene. So one is you cannot debug it because you don't know the basics. You don't know how Flexbox works. So you can go to an inspector. You can see there is a specific class there are specific properties, but you're not sure what each property means. So you're not sure about how this works. Another thing is you're also not able to explain this to someone else because you do not know the basics. So let's say you end up in an interview question about flexboxes. So you know how to make something with Bootstrap and use Flexbox in it using the classes provided by Bootstrap, but you don't know how Flexbox works. So that may be an interview question for you, and you're not sure about that. And then another thing is these technologies, they are for a specific time. So let's say if today nobody start using Flexbox, nobody start using Bootstrap. One of the good example is jQuery. Like 10 years ago, it was on one of the top JavaScript technology, but now almost nobody uses it. So if, for example, Bootstrap, if similar thing happens to Bootstrap and nobody start using it, then you have a new framework or a new technology or a new library for CSS. So you have to learn that. But still, your basics, you have no idea about the basics of how Flexbox works. So you will have a hard time debugging it, and you will have a hard time explaining it to yourself as well as to an interviewer, or if someone asks you a question about Flexboxes in an event or somewhere you're doing a public speaking. So that's why it is important to start with the basic concepts. I know everybody. I was in the same case. I was on the same board before as well. That everybody wants to rush to that exciting stuff, to the content, but the fundamentals are what you need to learn before you jump to those exciting stuff or jump to those things that you love. So in this case, maybe Bootstrap, but you do need to first have a good understanding of how vanilla CSS works without any frameworks and how everything works behind the scenes.
I completely agree. And then kind of as one final point that you mentioned in that video was related to burnout and how junior developers might tend to maybe overwork themselves at the start. Could you maybe kind of touch on this one before we wrap up here?
Yeah, so this is I still see this with some of my college friends who have recently got jobs, and this happened with me as well. So initially, when the people get the job, they are super passionate about it, which is a good thing. But for thinking about working for a company and being noticed and being the good developer, and out of this is because of like the first job and that excitement and that passion. They spend a lot of time on those projects and working. And one of the main thing I notice is people working on the weekends as well. And this happens with my friends as well. I think most of them stop doing this now because they figured out they are compromising on their health. But all of these things, like having no work-life balance, working on the weekends, etc., this eventually leads to burnout, and that affects your health, that demotivates you, and that comes as a cost of your health and a lot of things. So one of my advice to the junior developers is it's good that you got a job. It's good that you got a job or a contract or some new work, but make sure to keep a limit of your work and your personal life. Do not work on the weekends, especially for a company. If you're being hired for a company, you do not need to work on the weekends. Your weekend is supposed to be not an office day, but a home day. So spend time with the family, spend time with yourself, do things that you like to do, and be ready for the Monday so you can have a very good time on Monday. So yeah, make sure that you do not burn out by doing a lot of work, and otherwise you are just compromising on your own health.
Absolutely. I know this is something that I ran into early on. It was like, I got this first job. I come from a self-taught background, so I was like super excited and everything. And when I first came into it, I was like super eager to please everybody around me and like just get all the work done, and was working super late hours, weekends, stuff like that. And soon came to find out that this is not a sustainable path for a entire career. So I think, with this, it's definitely good to work hard, and there's probably a time and place to put in some extra hours and stuff like that. But if you're regularly finding yourself working like 10 to 12 hour days and working the weekends and stuff like that, it might come back to bite you, might lead to burnout, and you might stop kind of enjoying coding and kind of what got you into coding. So absolutely agree with that. And I think with that, it's a good place to kind of wrap it for us here. If people really enjoyed your content and were like, hey, this guy knows the stuff, I want to learn more about him, where can people kind of go to kind of keep track of what you're doing and all that stuff?
Sure. So you can get all of the links of me on my website, which is khattak.dev, khattak.dev. You can just search me on Google with my phone name, or maybe Khattak Dev, and you will be able to find me on Google, and including my links. I'm super active on Twitter as well as on LinkedIn. So if someone wants to catch up with me, apart from this, I consistently post short tips and hacks and code snippets on my Instagram, which is the same handle as of the other handles. So all of my social handles are the same, Khattak Dev. So you can find me there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Arsalan.
You're welcome.